Some days Mother Nature really doesn't want to play fair. You might be lucky enough to never have been caught in a thunderstorm or a cyclone, but that's not the case for everyone, and in some instances the weather is wilder and weirder than you can imagine. So let's take a look at some of the weirdest storms ever recorded on camera. Giant hailstorm. No city knows how to run for cover quite like El Paso, Texas. This video shows the magnitude of the hailstorms reported to have cost the city upwards of $3 billion in insurance claims. But how can hailstorms be so unusually destructive? Hail is formed during a storm's updraft, where warm air feeding the storm is pulled up to high altitudes along with the water droplets within it. As the draft reaches around 20,000 feet, temperatures plummet to a frosty minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. The droplets begin to freeze and coalesce as more water vapor is added from the updraft. The more powerful the updraft, the higher the hail is able to reach, and the bigger it grows. But what goes up must come down. Once the weight of the hail is too heavy to be supported by the updraft, it plummets to earth. Smaller storms make smaller hailstones, but larger storms can produce colossal lumps of ice, the largest of which was recorded during a 2010 storm in Vivian, South Dakota. It measured in at a terrifying 7.87 inches in diameter. To put that size into perspective, a standard bowling ball has a diameter of 8.5 inches. To get to these sizes, hail needs to have been in temperatures around minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That would place it around 60,000 feet up. At those heights, a 2-inch hailstone can fall at 60 to 70 miles per hour, but a 4 to 7-inch hailstone can fall in excess of 100 miles per hour. You could call that a strike. Sudden hailstorm Siberia. On the 12th of July 2014, residents of the Siberian town Novosibirsk were enjoying a typical summer's day of 105 degrees out on the beach. But in a split second, the temperature dropped to 69 degrees. Confused beachgoers began collecting their belongings when they found themselves being pelted by an onslaught of golf ball-sized hail. High winds flung debris from buildings and trees over the beach, and hail continued to pelt swimmers in the water. But after a few minutes, the storm completely subsided, and the day returned to its summer setting as if nothing had happened. How was such a freak storm on such a warm day even possible? A wall of cold Arctic air had traveled down from the north, hitting the warm front the residents had been enjoying. As the warm air was violently shunted upwards, its collision with the cold front formed storm clouds. The strength of the wind here shows just how powerful the storm's updraft was, producing 1.5-inch hailstones that fell around 54 miles per hour. Despite this, there were no reported injuries. That makes this a typical Russian summer, I guess. ANVIL crawler lightning storm. They say lightning never strikes the same place twice, but what about lightning that never strikes the ground at all? Take a look at this incredible footage of ANVIL crawler lightning. These horizontal bursts of spider-like electricity can span huge distances across the sky. But how? Essentially, all lightning is just channels of ionized air carrying an electrical current between two different areas of charge. But the polarity of lightning discharge can change everything from the way the branches propagate to how they extend across space and time. But ANVIL crawler lightning occurs at altitudes of 36,000 feet, meaning they're only visible in cloud and rain-free conditions. This is actually the lowest section of the Earth's atmosphere, known as the troposphere. When thunderstorms begin to swell, they can only rise so far before they hit an updraft ceiling known as the TROPOPAUSE. This forces the spread of the storm outwards, meaning that lightning at these levels isn't directed down, but across to other charged areas in the storm. The result is a spectacular discharge that sprawls out across the sky, like sparks flying from the top of an anvil. Well, that name was clearly a bolt of inspiration. Wet microburst. On the 18th of July in 2016, an image akin to the mushroom cloud of an atom bomb dominated the skies over Phoenix, Arizona. But this wasn't the beginning of World War III. This giant anomaly is ironically called a wet microburst, and in just 1 hour it dumped over 1.42 inches of precipitation over the city. An event like this is thought to occur once every 10 years. So what goes into the making of such a rare and deadly downpour? For a start, wet microbursts don't happen on their own. They're formed during a thunderstorm where rainfall from the storm enters the streams of hot, dry air underneath. The rain then evaporates and cools in the surrounding air. This significant cooling by evaporation makes the downdraft of rainfall under the storm accelerate because the cold air is denser than the hot air. The drag of this precipitation can punch through a weak portion of the updraft, resulting in a localized cascading column hurtling towards the ground. The more rain that evaporates, the faster the cascade falls. When it hits the ground at this force, it has nowhere to go but horizontally outwards, as you can see in the footage. The resulting winds from this downforce can reach up to 130 miles per hour and are common across the eastern US during springtime when weather fronts cross the country. I'm never going anywhere without an umbrella ever again. Ice storm. To most of the world, the event of freezing rain or an ice storm has brought entire cities to a standstill. But in Canada, this is just Wednesday. Take a look at this time lapse of an ice storm from 2013. Doesn't look like anything's wrong? Pay close attention to the position of the tree on the left-hand side. The sheer weight of the ice forming on the branches is dragging the whole canopy towards the ground. Only when the temperatures rise enough for the ice to thaw do the trees begin an unusual resurrection process and act like nothing ever happened. These are sneaky storms that appear to be gentle rain falling in icy conditions, but in several hours a sheet of ice over 1/4 of an inch thick can blanket the vicinity. So why is it that this rain freezes on everything it touches when it's cold, but regular rain doesn't? Frozen precipitation in storm clouds melts to rain while it's falling through a warm layer of air on its way down. With normal rain, the warm layer reaches all the way to the earth, but freezing rain falls through a smaller layer of warm air. It melts to a temperature below freezing, but in a phenomenon known as supercooling, the droplets themselves don't freeze. Only when they come into contact with the sub-zero temperatures on the ground do the droplets freeze almost instantly. A thick film of ice then develops as more supercooled rain strikes the ground, hence freezing rain. This is the worst frozen sequel ever. Dust storm of DUBBO. The Australian wildfires of 2019 and 2020 have had a devastating effect on the New South Wales region of the kangaroo-loving continent. Sadly, the fallout from the devastation is far from over. On January 19, 2020, thunderstorms whipped up the dust, ash, and debris left by the fires and carried a 186-mile dust storm over the town of DUBBO. At 6:30 p.m., the wind gusts were recorded at 60 miles per hour. At 7:45 p.m., that rose to 66 miles per hour. As you can see in this video, once the dust wall hit, the town was plunged into darkness, which reportedly lasted for hours. But what made this sandstorm so huge? A warm front that had resulted in one of the longest-running drought periods in recent history collided with a seasonal cold front, which led to severe thunderstorms sweeping across the desert-like area. The sheer magnitude of these storm winds pulled dust and debris high up into the atmosphere, creating an abominable dust front. In parts of Australia, dust storms have been occurring with record-breaking frequency over the past year, and currently show no signs of letting up. Are we in Mad Max right now? Blood rain. In 2001, the residents of the southern Indian state Kerala witnessed an event of biblical proportions. Blood rain. Okay, it wasn't actually blood, but for 2 months, Kerala residents woke up to this with no explanation. Research at the time found that the rainwater's red particles were made up predominantly of carbon and oxygen, as well as a series of unknown spores. But none of these had origins that could be explained by changes in the local environment. It's a mystery that took over 10 years to solve. The spores were eventually identified as an algal bloom called TERATOPHILIA annulate, which was not native to India. Scientists ultimately speculated that the spores were introduced into the atmosphere in Austria and carried down by a cold front to Kerala. But then in July 2018, live footage was caught of the spectacle for the first time. A factory in Russia witnessed a huge red downpour sweep through its car park, covering all the motors in a fine red mist. As the religious began getting down on their knees, it came to light that this was in fact a nickel factory. Metal processing giant Nornickel revealed the rain had been caused by a cleanup operation of rust from its factory floors. Vast amounts of red iron oxide residue was accidentally blown into the rain falling over the parking lot. You can tell your grandma to calm down now. The 4 horsemen ain't coming for her after all. Volcano lightning. It's bad enough hearing about volcano eruptions on the news, but if you're ever unlucky enough to be caught in one, the lava flow might be the least of your worries. What you can see in this footage from Joshua Bobadilla is a terrifying volcanic lightning storm from the Tall volcano eruption in January 2020. As particles of ash are explosively shot into the air, they collide and begin to generate static electricity. Ordinary thunderstorms can generate electricity through a process known as ice charging, where clouds containing water become electrified as ice crystals collide within them. Volcanic eruptions can work on the same principle, as studies have found water can be sourced from magma. As the hot updraft drags the volcanic plume into the freezing height of the atmosphere, ice forms from water vapor and greatly increases lightning activity. It sure makes for a nightmare-fueled light show. Supercell storm. On the spectrum of thunderstorms, supercells are the rarest and most dangerous. As you can see in this footage of a Colorado storm chase from 2015, what sets them apart is the presence of a mesocyclone, a persisting, rotating updraft. This devastating addition can produce punishing weather, including 70-mile-per-hour winds, torrential rain, frequent to continuous lightning, 2-inch hail, and sometimes the formation of EF5 tornadoes. But these monstrous storms don't just pop into existence. What conditions create them? First up, you need a thunderstorm. Moisture from the earth is lifted into the atmosphere by warm weather. As it cools at higher altitudes, latent heat is released from the droplets, creating a warmer air, which then rises as an updraft in a process known as convection. While updrafts are present along with downdrafts from precipitation, the simultaneous presence of both drafts creates considerable turbulence. At this point, the formation of the storm is reliant on the presence of changing wind speeds and directions at different altitudes, which creates a rolling motion called horizontal vorticity. A warm updraft then bends the spinning air upwards to become vertical vorticity and rotates within it. This is what forms the mesocyclone, and in turn, the supercell. FIRENADO. Do you think regular tornadoes were bad? How about a tornado made completely out of fire? On July 26, 2018, the Car Fire of California spawned the strongest tornado in the state's history. This is the very first footage of the phenomenon recorded in the USA. According to the National Weather Service, the inversion layer of the atmosphere, a warm sheet of air 3,280 feet up, began to trap the hot smoke from the fires as it plumed up. As energy built underneath the inversion, the cap was pushed higher and higher until it hit 20,000 feet. Hot air suddenly punctured through this protective layer and updraft soared explosively, doubling in height to 42,000 feet. To put that in perspective, commercial airlines cruise at about 36,000 feet. Winds then began pulling the clouds in multiple directions, creating vorticity in the updrafts and making them spin. As the fires rapidly grew in height, the column of air began to spin faster thanks to conserved angular momentum, like tucking your arms in when you're spinning around to go faster. Before long, the fire clouds were spinning out of control and consuming everything in their path. Who knew that tornadoes had a boss level? Have you ever seen any of these up close? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.